Hi, everybody, and welcome to the latest installment of UXDX Online series. We have another great lineup for you tonight, and I'm sure you're waiting to hear from our amazing speakers. But before we jump into the talks, I want to give a very quick introduction to what it is that we do at UXDX and why we host these talks. So our mission at UXDX is to help teams shift from building software through waterfall projects to using autonomous, empowered product teams. And the reason why that's our mission is because we believe it's a more efficient, effective, and sustainable way of building software in high change environments. And why I added that contextual bit about the change element is because if you're in a low change environment, it makes sense to use a project. Just create a team, build something, disband the team, put them somewhere else. But if you're in a high change environment, like many of the places where I've worked recently, where there's 100, 120 projects going on in parallel at any given time, it makes more sense to have people dedicated to a particular part of your product because they can really understand the customer, really understand the business needs, and be able to change and quickly iterate to figure out what's the best thing there. And then it becomes more efficient to have that structure, that product team structure. So what we do is we host talks from people from around the world who are sharing their part of the journey towards this more iterative and continuous way of working. So the talks won't go into the detail of the full process, but they're trying to share how they're moving along. And they'll share their challenges as well as their successes of how they're getting there. And hopefully when you listen to the talks, you'll have some questions that you want to ask, maybe something you want to go deeper into or something about your particular context. So please do feel free to ask those questions. You can write them in whatever channel you're watching this through, and we'll collate those and share them with the speakers. But sometimes we don't have time to get through all of the questions, and that's why we have our UXDX community Slack group. And in there, there's an Ask the Speakers channel. So any questions that we don't get time to get through tonight, we'll post them in there, and we'll invite the speakers to come and answer them for you as well. But that's enough about me. You're here to actually hear from our amazing speakers tonight. And first up, we have Erick, who will be talking about contextual user experience research application in low resource settings. So I'd like to welcome Erick. Thank you for joining us, Erick, and over to you now.
Thank you, Madden. Am I live now?
Yep, you're live and ready to go.
Today I'll talk about contextual user experience and give an illustration of how you can apply this in a low resource setting. Before we start, I'll give you a little background about my journey. So I'm from Kenya, and I grew up there. So most of my work is, when I speak about low resource settings, I'm referring to research that I did in Kenya as a graduate student and a PhD student. So after that, I joined IBM, where I conducted human-computer interaction research for the first 6 years. And the work that I did revolved around healthcare, financial inclusion, farming, and family communication routines. And most of this work focused on capturing the cultural, social practices in these local communities, middle income and low income mostly, and then providing design recommendations of how technology could be designed to take advantage of pervasive technology that existed, more so with the intention of modifying what already existed as opposed to creating new technology solutions. So within IBM, I then switched from Nairobi, where I was based in IBM Research Africa, and then I worked with teams in Yorktown and Japan on HCI for AI. So on that, we worked on IBM's automated machine learning tools. We worked on visualization of model creation using these tools, and also trustworthiness of AI systems. So I did that for a while, and then the last 2 years at IBM, I moved into UX and product, and for that, I worked on IBM Cloud products. And then this year, I switched into research consulting. So in market research, I found that there was a different approach to how UX was conducted. So at IBM, for instance, we focused on product and worked with product teams. And then when we started doing the social practice, studying in low resource settings, so that was in Kenya, we focused on understanding communities to inform the design of technology. But now in market research, we are focusing on creating business opportunities while staying there to keep working. By keeping working, I meant taking the design processes that I'll talk about here from one stage to the other, as opposed to just conducting UX for a specific product and stopping there. So how did we come to this term contextual UX? So like I mentioned up here, it's an evolving definition. I started thinking about it when I switched from product research at IBM and moved into market research. So the first time I came in contact with this term was when I was writing my dissertation, and I was reading Karen Holblatt's work, where she defined contextual design as a user-centered approach that used in-depth ethnographic research rooted in contextual inquiry, and then the data collected would be analyzed, and this would ideate how process of design would pick up. So based on that understanding of context, and also having worked in different contexts, so the rural communities, the product context at IBM, and now market research in the industry, I thought of another way of expressing a UX process that captured all these aspects of my experience. Now, the UX, the Interaction Design Foundation defines UX as a systematic study of targeted users and their requirements to add context and insights to the design processes through various means and to uncover problems and design opportunities. So for us, the starting point of our definition is I'm saying contextual UX to be a framework that seeks to understand the social practices of a user based on their context, and using that to inform the design of personalized and immersive experiences. So in the case of my experience, it's more around digital solutions. Overall, in the overall UX approach focuses on improving the digital experience of users, but more so you work with different sets of teams. So you work with stakeholders. Within stakeholders, you have users, you also have people who own the products, and then you have people who build the products. So as you capture a process or a problem that you want to understand, you get input from these three sets of users on what approach or what goals they need to be met. And then you conduct a research method. So some activities that you conduct to help answer these questions are desktop research, design thinking, contextual interviews. And then for products that are already in market and you want to monitor their performance, you conduct heuristic and maturity assessments. Now, once you do that, you also provide deliverables back to the stakeholders. And this could be prototypes, or they could be reports, and there could be also recommendations on which ways to improve the product. So that is the standard way of applying UX to solve user problems. So now what we have here is nothing different than what you've seen before. We have 5 steps of areas that we perceive UX could help improve. But the reason why we are drawing this in a circular way is because, like I mentioned, when I joined market research and started conducting UX, the goal is to first democratize user experience research. And then the other one is to, depending on what parts of this circle you engage with your clients, another goal is to also show them other aspects of how you can improve their solutions. So we'll take an example. So first, at IBM, we worked on specific parts of this circle that you see here. So for instance, we worked on products. So we would test the product, conduct user interviews, solve a user problem, work with stakeholders, and then provide feedback. But in industry research, when you get a concept from a client, you address the problem, but the other intention is to show them how you can move this work to the next step, which is design. It doesn't have to go through the circular path, but depending on the budget and the interest of your client, the idea is to show them how this all puts together. So that's why we have the circular path. And generally, to the right, when you're conceiving the concept, doing the design, it's more of interaction, and you want to show what could be provided. There are methods that are particular to help solve that problem. And then to the right is more of existing products that need to be improved. So in terms of personalization, what we mean here is that several people can come to a website, for instance, but depending on their role, all of them would have different goals. So that also calls into practice. They need to understand the users, define personas, but those are standard UX methods. But what is interesting is that as you build that, sometimes you also need concepts to improve the performance of personalization. So that is why we have a circular diagram. So now we want to take that concept that I just shared with you and apply it and show how it could be applied in a low resource setting. And to do that, I'm going to talk about one of the projects that I conducted while I was at IBM. So first, how do you even identify projects for scaling in a low resource setting environment? So there's several ways that this is done, and most of this is in research. You can look for unsolved problems that are in the market. A lot of work has been done in fintech, especially in Africa. You can also look at other solutions that were implemented earlier. So in the area of healthcare, we had, before the advent of video communication, we had telephone systems that hospitals could use to communicate with patients. So for instance, there was a system in India where messages could be sent to women who were pregnant. So those technologies that were designed before the advent of this wide use of videos could be iterated. And also you could pick up research recommendations from published work, such as in the area of healthcare. So what we're going to focus on is actually work that we did that focused on healthcare, but we moved it from research into a business product. So what you see here is a health facility. It's a rural health facility in Kenya, and they were interested in understanding how technology could be used to solve challenges in the area of hypertension management. But the title, this is a research publication that we conducted, and you can see that we looked to explore the rural community practices in HIV management for the design of technology for hypertensive patients living with HIV. So what this meant was this facility had undergone a very successful process where they used technology to monitor HIV within the community. And the country as a whole also had an electronic HIV management system that we learned from. But we focused on this local community because in addition to using the technology, they were interested in following up with the patients once they went out into the village. So that is where we started, and we conducted this study, but it stopped after the institution. So that was IBM and the health facility. Once we finished the research and then we presented the results, the project never moved into actual implementation. And that is one challenge that we have in low rural income settings or developing countries, that is called. The problem is that when these research problems are initiated, we go to the community, we tell them we are here to learn about challenges that you're experiencing. We're going to design technology and come back. But this facility was in my village, so even when it stopped, I still go back there. So I had a connection with it. So we pushed it forward. And then, so what I'm showing here, I've skipped several steps, but I'm showing that we iterated it into technology solutions. So this is the interface of our MVP. And what you can see is we have in the middle of this diagram, you can monitor visits of patients, capture trends, and then to the right, at the bottom, you can see that we can also sync some devices. So what we're doing here is we are digitizing reports for patients, and then these reports could be shared and also trends can be captured. So that solved one of the problems that we found in our research, where most of the treatments in hypertension were conducted on paper records, and when people moved from one facility to another, these records would disappear. And also we integrated other parts of this, other solutions to this MVP of ours. And another one is patients are able today to make appointments remotely via chat interface, among other things. So I'm just giving an highlight of how the project moved from research into a business product. But lessons that we learned were, one, we needed to support the role of community health volunteers, and these are people who are more connected to patients because they went to the village than at the facility where you go and see the doctor for about 30 minutes, they give you instructions and you go to the village. And then patient data was addressed in that we are digitizing records that would disappear, and over time people who have chronic illnesses face challenges when they can't access these records. And then third, appropriation of technology. This, we wanted to have a solution that people could access using cell phones, that they were already pervasive in these communities. The key point and one challenge that is faced when you work on such projects, this is just one, but like I mentioned, we've done several projects in healthcare, in farming, in water. We face the same challenge. And then one of the challenges that I think should be highlighted is that these projects eventually, we write research papers that people don't end up reading in the village. So change in strategy, this happens, like community institutions will set up these projects, and then once focus shifts, they do that. But this shift in strategy and then some recommendations don't end up being implemented because they're expensive is a big challenge, because when you go back to the community, usually it's a big problem when you start new research projects and 3 people have done research projects before you. The communities always look at you as if you are here just to meet your selfish goals. So now that is a big challenge that I mentioned, but we'll switch back to our project, which I mentioned. So we moved it from a research recommendation to an MVP. So an MVP is a product already that you can share. So I think one of the ways we can approach addressing the challenges of having research that is incomplete is to think about ways through which we can access these projects, build MVPs, engage communities, share information that helps people get to the building of technologies or picking of projects through opportunities that exist. So the opportunities are what I'm going to talk about now. So the first one is we can leverage technology training and focus on current trends to see how we can move projects that I think are staying at a point where we conduct a lot of research, we provide a lot of recommendations, and they remain sitting there. So one would be to offer training based on available free learning material. So what comes to mind here is Y Combinator training. They provide free learning materials on business models, pricing, startup funding, or even launching MVPs. In addition, you might also be lucky to get funding, but the information that we provide, I think, is very valuable. So that means if this information can be curated in some way and shared with people in low resource settings, especially people who are interested in those topics, that would be a very good way of sharing knowledge to people who can use it. And then we also want to capitalize on new learning avenues. So recently, especially after the experience that we had with COVID, there's a lot of information that is available on online forums. And for example, now, once you have a product such as an MVP, there are trainings that can teach you on how to design highlighting web pages for products, how to build brands, how to spot opportunities in social media such as Facebook groups, competitor challenges, and understand how you can conduct negotiation skills. What I'm saying is there's a lot of information that is available, but there's need to curate it in a way that it could be meaningful, especially for people in low resource settings where this technology might be moving so fast that they don't even see it or don't have access to it. The third one is to apply AI tools to automate activities. So this will not solve all problems, but this helps you understand what is going on in the field. And you can see there's tools such as SimilarWeb. So this is a software that you can install in your you can install it in your Chrome browser. It's an add-on, and then you can monitor people who visit your competitor websites, and you can even see the comments they're making, follow up, and then comment on these groups. That way you also get traction because you can just go to a group where there's a problem and you can mention, oh, try this other product, it's also solving that problem. So there's simple things like those ones. But still, we won't underestimate the need to have some knowledge to be able to implement this. But the point here is there are opportunities that could be explored to bridge the gap that has been necessitated over time with digital divide. So the topic of digital divide, the way we think about it, that those people in low resource settings will need to catch up with these people in developed side of the world. I think we can, once you have an MVP, the rest of it is a bit of marketing and understanding other aspects of product development. That information is available somewhere. But I think what is missing is a way to curate it so that the right people get this information and learn what they need to learn so that they're able to scale their products. So what are we proposing? So we are highlighting three areas where I think we could start from. So the first one, we're proposing that if we provide basis of research that addresses key areas such as healthcare, water, natural resources, and financial inclusion, these are topics that are very hot in developing areas. I think we have a lot of publications that already exist in this area. So if there was a way that we could look at work that is sitting, their recommendations have not been implemented, that work, it would be good to bring it up in some ways. Again, it's training or looking for ways to take this information and make it usable to the local communities. Like I said, we don't have a strong culture in low resource settings where communities go to read research papers of the findings. The other part is UX research, and also refer to this as human-computer interaction, just because the products, the recommendations that we provided in most of the work that I mentioned were design guidelines. So those design guidelines, without interpretation or implementation, they will just remain there. So I think we also want to look at today, like I mentioned, there's a lot of tools that are coming up. The AI is advancing, and over time, the approach to UX is for us. I think we can, we can go there, teach people about how they can use user testing to conduct user research, but we also need products that solve our problems and then conduct research on those ones. But there's ready-made products that exist. So there's products that can help you with capturing clients who come to your website, monitoring what they do, and even collect payments. So figuring out how to connect what we have and what already exists can solve a huge problem. So then you don't have to employ a lot of people to do these other parts to build a complete product on your own. And then finally, integrating UX solutions to have a complete flow. I think this is also a very good opportunity because we have social media that people are now engaging in. It's easier to market your products in these ways. Not easy in terms of doing, but I mean in terms of opportunity that are available. And traditionally, some of these processes required large teams for implementation. So one thing that I've liked over the last 2 years is I've been following the Shopify shop creation. I think there's a lot of automated parts of it that show that there's a big potential if you can move an MVP product or move a solution that someone has. There's a lot of integrations that you can add, help you with payments, help you with putting your website online, help you with marketing, and all these things, you can learn them. But I think the challenge still remains is which way can this be provided so that it's useful to people who are in low resource settings. And that brings us to the end of the talk.
Great. Thank you very much, Eric. Thought that was a really interesting talk and kind of hit on some of the challenges that I guess are a bit unique to the low resource setting, but also very familiar. And that brings me to kind of my first question. You hit on the point of all the research gets done, but then often it just languishes there and it doesn't get implemented. So when I was looking at your solutions, it was kind of, well, how can people still get access to that research and all of those research papers that have been written and all of that information? But how do we solve the problem of that's still there, of that gap of getting it implemented without relying on just having the good luck to have you in the village to build the MVP?
So I think my view of how this could be done is someone has to do the heavy lifting in the beginning. So by heavy lifting, what I mean is what I mean by heavy lifting is I was part of a project. I have better understanding of the overall view. I initiated the project. I've worked with these people in different countries and saying that information, you have to get it just through the way that I did. But I think I have a bigger role now to simplify this information in a way that people can use it. So it's not work that somebody else will do. It's work that we will set communities just the same way UXDX is set up. Like someone had to do work to bring a community together. So we need to do that. I think we need to collect with people who are building this, who are doing research, and we need a different way of presenting research to people in low resource settings. They still need to know how they can play part. Otherwise, if we don't do that, I don't have a solution, but I think we need a community to think about ways through which we can present this research. Otherwise, it looks like you came, conducted studies, and left, and we'll continue with our work. So it's a process, but the first part of it is to form a community that will approach this solution.
Great, great. And I look, we had a quick chat beforehand. I'm quite bullish on AI and where it's going to go to over the next few years, just with what we've seen with GitHub Copilot and others this year, that I'm hopeful that over time it'll actually become a lot easier to build the software. But the challenge is actually going to be in the research and making sure that we ask the computers to build the right thing. So it's really interesting. I think your way of trying to bring all of that research up is going to be incredibly valuable then.
Yeah, and then like I said earlier, I think that's a big opportunity, and AI also provides it kind of provides a shortcut, but also it's a challenge. So a shortcut in terms of when there's parts of automation, but also are we going to be able to bring our communities to a level where they can input this automation, input information for this to support this automation? Because as you understand, AI also depends with the data that it's fed. So that means, yeah, I think that means for people like me or people who are interested in advancing this work in developing settings, we need to quickly think of ways of coming together and thinking through it. But nobody else is going to do it. So I think it's just us, and then communities that we build, people who are interested, and then we'll make some steps. We might not solve all the problems, but we can make the first 2 steps to lead towards solving the problem. So I agree with you.
Excellent. Well, I think that brings us to time. So I think it was really interesting talk. But as I said, I think people are seeing that same problem, whether it's in a low resource setting or in high resource settings, where all this research gets done and yet it isn't being implemented enough. So I think some great ideas there on how to solve it and bubble up the research in the right way. So I hope that's useful for everybody out there who's watching. But I just want to thank you, Erick, for sharing today.
Yeah, thank you, Aiden. Thank you.
Thanks. So up next, we have Brian Cugelman, who will be talking about color psychology for behavioral product design. So I'd like to welcome Brian to the stage.
Hey, thanks a lot. It is a pleasure to
Excellent.
join you.
So
And
you just click on present and then I'll share your screen. I'm seeing the...
Oh, I see. Okay, hold on. I have to click on set. So we have one problem in the UX of the tool.
Oh, okay, I'm seeing your...
Because it's not obvious to me. You can't see my screen?
I can see it, but I can see the full outline of the slides. So if you look at the screen now...
Yes. I have that because of design flaws from Microsoft. So.
Oh, okay, fair enough. If you're happy with it like this, then we'll go ahead. So I'll hand it over to you. Thank you very much, Brian.
Okay, my pleasure. So welcome, everyone. I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes talking about the psychology of color. But before I start, I have to maybe introduce one very important subject, and that's one of the problems with the psychology of color is it's probably the most discredited of areas of psychology and also in design. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I won't go into entirely, but to make a long story short, the science was a little questionable in the early days of psychology. And then they didn't really have a lot of great findings. And unfortunately, what happened is the pop psychologists filled the gaps with invented nonsense, and then the blogosphere got hold of it. But in fact, in the last decade or so, there has been so much amazing research. And so what I'm going to do today is just talk through a little bit of that. And when we design, whether it's more like graphic design or UX design or, interaction, maybe something a little bit in between, color is always something that's on the table. Now, unfortunately, UX designers, they don't really learn color properly. And I think a lot of people in UX see color as, oh, that's for graphic designers. They see it as that's not my job, right? I make things more intuitive and usable and, achieve a number of things under the US banner. But they don't really learn color theory like graphic designers. And of course, when graphic designers learn it, they have a whole other attitude that's more about harmony and beauty. And both of those are not very healthy perspectives when it comes to product design. So a color system as part of a visual design system needs to hit on a number of things, right? So it's got to be healthy. So I think there will be laws on everything I'm covering, or some of the things I'll be covering today, because you can actually cause cancer and diseases in people through bad color design issues. Accessibility laws, right? Color is very relevant there. Salient, so making things stand out. So I was tripping at the beginning of this because what I had to do next was not salient. If what I had to do next was salient, I would have known instantly. So whoever designed the web conferencing tool maybe should take some pointers from this discussion. Instantly clear. So a person has to have instant comprehension, have cognitive knowledge. You should be motivating, things should feel effortless, and we need to engender trust. So what I'm going to do today is talk through some technical color science stuff. Right? I'll go quickly. I'll describe color systems, and I'm quite sure almost all of you have major mistakes and misunderstandings. So I'm going to clear up a couple of things pretty quickly. I'll talk briefly about why sRGB sucks, and it really does suck. I'll show you the Cugelman color system, at least just a couple of tools. And what I'll do is I'll cover a few topics and show you with the Cugelman color system tools how we can visualize some of these concepts that you might not have otherwise understood. So we'll look at salient visual hierarchies, cognitive design, emotional design, and that will be a wrap. So just quickly, I'll introduce myself. So I'm a scientist. I did a PhD on the area of like online psychology for technology. I teach at a number of universities and also my private training academy, Behavioral Design Academy. I used to work for governments to find out if behavior and social change programs worked. And of course, I worked for many years in industry as a hands-on tech person. So I still code, I build websites, you know, I work in PHP and Python and do databases as well as like data science. And I love building my startup products, which is why my latest obsession behind me is I am really I'm getting into electrical engineering because I'm normally 5 to 10 years ahead of the market. And I'm now thinking about how do we design for consciousness? So I'm ready for human technology brain interfaces. And I have a number of ideas. It's still the early days, so I've started tinkering, and I'm having a lot of fun with that. So let's get down to technical color stuff. I'll go very quickly on just a couple of basic concepts. So this is a classic diagram from Sir Isaac Newton's publication where he had discovered something about the physics of light that led to our understanding of what we call the color spectrum. And that's the range of colors that we see in what we call visible light. And this is a diagram from his book. And then a lot of people don't know, but actually Sir Isaac Newton invented the color wheel. And what we know today, and what actually Newton had discovered, is that the reason why we get different colors from a prism is that we're actually bending the light. So the light bends on a prism and it actually splits apart. And that's how we get the multicolored effect. But if you fast forward a little bit, so we go past Newton, and now we understand that light, like those nice colors we see, light is not light. Actually, light is something you call electromagnetic radiation. And so we have all these funny terms like gamma rays and X-rays and UVs and visible light. So if you ever found this confusing, it is. And the reason is that there's no such thing as gamma rays, X-rays, UVs, visible light, infrared. They're all just arbitrary categories that we have put on top of one spectrum, right? So it's the electromagnetic spectrum. And these terms we give are just convenient terms that make sense because they're useful arbitrary categories, right, based on properties and how we use them. So what that means is that the thing we call light that we use in design is no different from microwaves and radio waves, right? So what you use in graphic and UX design, someone else uses to heat up food or to send communications. It is the same stuff. So to put that into perspective, the colors we work with have all these properties that are part of the electromagnetic spectrum. And because of that, our use of light impacts on people's health. It impacts on their levels of alertness. There's all sorts of impacts from light that are way off the design spectrum, but I think they will be coming back in. And the reason is that ambient lighting can have a huge impact on people. And I think at some point we have to think beyond the screen, think about technologies that are more ambient and in the environment. So, where does UX start and stop? Right. So at some point, it really goes into your home if you're into smart lighting and a number of these technologies. So just to clear up some technical concepts, and the next slide I'm going to show you, a lot of people do not understand this. So pay up, pay attention to this. It's very important. So what I have in front of you is a perceptually balanced color spectrum. And the categories that we give are arbitrary to a degree, but they're not entirely. So blue, cyan, green, yellow, and red. There's actually a reason why I pulled out these colors. And these are maybe the colors that are most tied in with our neurobiology and with how we think about colors, culture. So we know that the color spectrum we have is actually just a range from ultraviolet light that we into blue, cyan, yellow, green, red, and then over to infrared, which we can't see. Now, what I'm showing you here, this might look a little confusing. Let me explain. What I have down here is the electromagnetic spectrum. And in this range, what we have are the colors that we humans perceive, right? From blue to red. That's what we see. Now, because of how the atmosphere works, right? Our perspective on here on planet Earth, right? Based on how light is filtered in the sky, is day and night actually has another spectrum. So we do not have just one color spectrum. There are two. And a lot of people don't understand this. And it's very important because you cannot do health-focused technology if you don't get this concept. And so there's something called the color temperature spectrum. So you've probably seen this on light bulbs, right? And this is one variation. There's a few that move around. So if you find it confusing and you're like, well, which is the right one? They're just different mathematical models, but they will basically go from warm light, right? Down to the cool blue. And what this shows you is the time of day. And so this color system you can use to make your users pay more attention, to be more alert or more sleepy. You can use it to stop circadian disruption of our technology. No. And I'll get back to that in one moment. Now, another thing that a lot of people have been misled about is it's not entirely true that we see with red, green, and blue cones. So here's why. We have red, green, and blue cones, right? So we know that our color perception, we use monitors that are based on light emitting diodes in these color spectrums with a backlight, and that's how we can see all the different colors. But what happens in our brain is our brain actually mashes these up, combines them, and it creates a red, green, and a blue, yellow channel. And this is important because there are multiple color wheels. And if you've ever found color wheels insanely confusing because they always seem to shift on you, this is actually part of the explanation. So when you talk about primary colors, if you've ever also been confused because you're like, I thought it was just red, green, and blue that are the primary colors, right? Why is it sometimes yellow, blue, and red? Or sorry, yellow, blue, and green that you might see as well. And it's because we actually have 4 primary colors. Now, also the eye sees in black and white through this process and our rods, and we see light at a certain spectrum that wakes us up. So let me talk about something that a lot of people, I think, find very confusing. So think about it like this. When you design any technology, okay, I'll explain this also in a moment. The default color system on almost all technology is the worst color system that you could be designing technology with. And what that means is that the standard industry baseline is something that does not match human perception. And the other thing is we don't understand how color impacts on our emotions and mood, because we need to also be thinking about color temperature. And of course, at the end of the day, brightness levels are what we're insanely sensitive to. And so basic grayscale probably matters more than hue, which I'm a huge fan of grayscale like base template systems with accent colors. I think it's probably one of the clearest systems that does exist out there. So there's actually a couple different spectrums that we could be talking about. Now, here's a question. If you want to maybe throw this into the chat box, which is the true color wheel? This one here, right, where it's arranged like this with these colors, number 2, number 3, number 4, or number 5, which a lot of you might find a little funny. Anyone want to throw your best guesses into the chat window? Which is the real one? Anyone? Going once, going twice. Okay. Well, there is a discussion going on, but I'm not getting a clear signal, so I'll just move on. So here's the thing. There are different color wheels, and it depends on your assumption. And so in fact, the Newtonian color wheel, the first one, is not an accurate one. So if you see this in the history books, I wouldn't go with it. So someone voted for number 2. So the artist color wheel. Now, this is a very popular one, right? And you could see like some of the differences. So it's like, you know, blue and orange, whereas this one's blue and yellow, and this one's blue, and it's, you know, probably like orange because it's in between, but it's not structured like that. And here we're another blue and yellow. So this is one that came from visual design. So it's very good for artistic and for aesthetically pleasing design. The printer's wheel is the one that we use in technology, and that's because we have CMYK and RGB are an opposite. So it, you know, making those shifts are a bit painful, but at least the system is designed around it. But the choice of actual colors was unfortunately very bad by Microsoft and HP, who unfortunately set the standard, and not Adobe. But anyways, that's history. The Munsell system, you know, has a slightly different structure, and this is actually my favorite. So the color opponent wheel. Now, the color opponent wheel, it's not that popular, but it is an artificial intelligence, because you could use this color system to read people's emotions through facial expressions. And I'm not going to get into that, but I think this is going to be very important for like neurotech and the next generation of intelligent software. So let me briefly explain why sRGB sucks so badly. So there's something called a color space that you might have heard of. And a color space is where we take the abstract concept of a color and we express it in a nice geometric pattern. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, here's why. So if you're to map human color perception, what you would get is a crazy looking blob that doesn't really follow a great pattern, right? So with that insanely complex blob, you can't really work with it. And if you wanted to turn it into a mathematical system for computers, you would be sort of out of scope all the time. It would be a mess. So a system like RGB or sRGB says, well, there's 3 primary colors that we use in the monitors. And what we could do is we could have little rules. So if you have blue, you know, blue will be 00, 255. If you haven't done this, what I suggest you do to properly learn RGB is go search for one of the cubes and type in these numbers and see if you can produce the colors. And it's a good exercise because it will help you at least internalize RGB. Now, the problem with RGB is it's not mathematically uniform. So you can't do statistics on this. If you do, nothing works. Right? Now, C-Lab or lab colors are perceptually uniform. They were designed to match human perception, and they're centered in the midpoint of where all humans are believed to perceive colors. And that's why it's a global standard. Now, sRGB was a very unfortunate decision. If you look at the millions of colors of different color systems out there, sRGB is the worst, whereas like photo RGB, and Rec 2020 is much higher. So if you look at like video and other industries, they have way superior color systems to what we have in tech. So you think like the Silicon Valley techies are leading the world with innovation? I would say actually not. Our color systems are archaic. They don't even match how human perception works. And they're so out of scope most of the time that any attempt at using them almost always clips. And that means things go out of the range of our standard monitors and color systems. Now, you can go beyond this, but normally people don't. So let me show you. So, I was thrilled that, one of the, I follow this scientist, Kitoka, who does amazing work on visual perception and optical illusions. And I asked him, he said I could use his analysis. So he's comparing the the intensity of sRGB colors across the color spectrum. And this is brightness level. So have you ever wondered why yellow seems so bright? Well, it's because it is, and it's actually not supposed to be. Now, do you want to know what happens when you do that? I'll show you what happens. So this is Google's material design, and I don't think their staff are paying attention to this research at material design, because if you actually look at material design system, right, there, what should be even steps, and you convert it to grayscale, you don't get even steps, right? So you see how this is actually the blue. And actually, sorry, I think visually this would have been clearer if I literally put them on top like this, because this is actually what I'm doing. So do you see how, like, out here it's brighter here, and you see it gets darker? So that means that the colors they picked actually don't match human perception properly. Now, check this out. I can't believe IBM did a better job than Google. This is hard to believe, but go figure. IBM's color system is perceptually uniform, or at least a lot closer. It's not perfect, right? But you see how like black is black, and you look across, you get this even banding. So when you look at that, you have a more balanced experience, and that's what you get with perceptual uniformity. Now, I think why most of the internet and most of our tech is like this is because our tools suck and the interfaces are not designed. And let me show you exactly. So this is CLab. So right now there's a WC3 proposal to make this a new standard to support it in CSS. I haven't been following it in the last like maybe 5 months or so. But I highly recommend that everyone supports this, because what it will do is will create the road for us to finally get usable human-centered colors. And how are you supposed to do human-centered design when we don't have human-centered design systems? We don't have human-centered technology that can display the colors, and people don't even have the human-centered knowledge on what to do with the systems that they don't have access to, because we're all like living in the matrix, locked inside a crappy system with options that are so bad that we don't even realize it because we've never had a chance to escape them. Now, this is the CLab colors, which are uniform. And this is sort of how they would look on an uneven system. So here's the thing. You can't use this in data science, because the minute you try it, you miscommunicate to people, because we perceive visually things in a linear fashion. And if they don't match our perception, they don't match our cognition. So I'm going to introduce just a couple of tools that I developed, and I'm just going to jump through a few lessons to show you. So this is the latest edition of my color psychology map. And what we do is we look at a color spectrum from sort of low to high wavelength, and we have like categories. So they're broken up on this side, and brightness. Now, typically I go up because there's a certain trend of salience increase. And at the same time, I also design for circadian design in my technologies, where I want to look at dark to light, right? So this is going to be maximum brightness level. And so you have a color temperature shift throughout the day that matches how our biorhythms are, right? So I know the idea of biorhythms is considered new age flaky stuff and not serious science, but that's not true anymore. That's how it was when I was younger. So the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded a few years ago for the discovery of the circadian clock. This is no longer flaky new age stuff, tainting science. It's actually, well, we're giving out Nobel Peace Prizes for it. This is not a question any longer. So now that I've shown you a couple of tools, I'm just going to talk briefly about this. So if any of you are doing work in lighting tech or ambient technologies, we can now design around these. So you might see tools for smart lighting technologies that use these. And so I think we need to have new UX tools for smart lighting, for ambient lighting, and of course on screen as well, because we can do a lot in template design. And I'm not covering that, right? Where we've got like half hour and I spend like 15 hours to go through this subject. So, but well, I'll just stop there. So let me quickly go through very briefly a couple of key subjects. So I want to talk about salience in visual hierarchy. So let's learn something a little bit from plants and Darwin. So plants are very competitive, right? So they're competing with other plants. And basically, if you're a plant, you want to attract those pollinators. And you're like, hey, come pollinate me. And so plants, they have had quite some time of evolutionary experience of visual design patterns that attract insects. Now, it's not that much different for us. So whether you're a bee, being attracted through ultraviolet light to plants, which is how they look, or you're a user, right? You want to have more salient or less salient buttons in tech. So we can have different problems. So unfortunately, the World Happiness Report, their most important button on the page is camouflage. So I would say that it was quite funny that I actually found a scientific study on chameleon camouflage patterns. I was like, holy crap, that matches the exact pattern of their button camouflage, which is why I put lizards on their page. But that's not really a good way to get people to notice important things. So are there colors that are more salient? Well, yes and no. So hue and contrast, contrast ratios and saturation and your overall context probably have more to do with the salient. So which colors stand out more or less. However, this is like, and sorry, this is an older version of the slide. So I do apologize. This is not the perceptually balanced version. So sorry for that. But this does come from a number of studies, and I extracted data and I averaged them out and weighted them for bias. And so what you find is that all colors compared to all other colors show that there are peaks in human salience if you just compare colors around the reds and also around the cyan range. And when it comes to black and white, there's this sort of U-shaped trend where I think it's like higher contrast black or higher contrast white, depending on the context, will stand out. So now let's look at the map and see what we think about this. So let's take it back to UX. And what we can do is we can take different categories of user interface components, like say calls to action, right? Give them cognitive meanings and then assign them to certain color bands. Now, when it comes to accessibility requirements, if you're doing AAA standard contrast ratios, which is insanely difficult and painful, I know a lot of people in industry, people have their heart in the right way and want things to be in the interest of users and will lobby for it, but they also think AAA is too much. I also think AAA fails because the problem with AAA is it's short-sighted. You get high contrast between foreground and background, but then you get low contrast between elements. And so you win one battle and you lose another. And that's one reason why I really dislike AAA. But AA, I think, is a healthy balance and a good minimum standard for the industry. But so we can assign these things to colors. So that will give us higher contrast. And what I typically like to do is obviously have higher salience on things that are most important. So obviously purchase behavior. Now, out of the box, these hue differences give you some clues, but obviously your overall design can tweak this. So by no means are these magic colors. They're just out of the box with nothing else considered, you've got an advantage. But the minute you build a design system and start having more or less of something, don't worry about this. You are in control. You decide what's most or less salient. And of course, we also have to do the same thing for dark mode as well, because we want to control access to light, not overload people. So let me know, maybe very quickly, because we don't have too much time. I'll just talk about cognition very briefly. So a couple of things. So if you've ever wondered, are there primary colors? So I'll tell you a bunch of studies. So red, yellow, green, blue, and purple stand out in the neuroscience, and a number of psychology studies is possibly the most important colors, or the most primary. Also, these are the colors that, as I showed you, right? Red, green, and blue are the colors that we know are from vision, that we use in most things. But as I discussed, yellow is also that opponent channel. And purple also is, it's like between red and blue, and it's an optical illusion in the brain. So babies can contrast these colors right away. Check this out. This is crazy. Cultures, when they develop language, almost always develop terms around those same concepts. And neuroscience studies show that you have the fastest reaction times in those color categories. And so if you're to map it out, we know that if you're going for these like basics, you're probably going to be in ranges of categories where you have fastest reaction time. And I think this is a key for visual design. So let me maybe just end by talking about a couple of things. So when you pick colors, obviously we want things that are processed fast. We can also have semantic associations to things like negative, positive. People have been trained to associate colors with traffic lights. And there's one other thing that's important. So some things are better for categories. So different hues are good for categories, but differences of brightness or saturation are good for concepts of magnitude. Do not ever confuse the two. People do that a lot. It's a rookie mistake. And you learn your lesson in a user test if you've made that, but scan for it and try to avoid it. And here's what happens. If you use a perceptually balanced system, right, you can get a sequential ordering. And we can also use this in UX. And one thing a lot of people do not know, the color systems in data visualization systems are not the same as those used in visual design systems. In visual design systems, aesthetics and beauty matter, and they are not perceptually balanced. In data visualization systems, if you do not use perceptually balanced color systems, people will be confused. You must do it. Now, one other thing on comprehension, and this is like a really funny thing, is we can use different colors for categories, but if you really want to nail it, you can look at cross-modal effects where people have all sorts of funny associations between color and smell, color and sight, color and hearing, color and touch. It might sound crazy, but there you go. So I will sort of end at this point because we sort of reached the end. So I hope you have enjoyed the show. And if you want to, stay in touch, you could find me at the Behavioral Design Academy, or reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to stay in touch. And if you have any questions, fire away.
Hi, Brian. Thank you for that. That was a really detailed jump into color theory. What surprised me was that we ended up back at RGB, red, green, and blue, as the core color categories. So it's kind of, yes, it doesn't match the kind of the equal brightness, but they are, I guess, the three key ones which we perceive. We don't have time for questions, unfortunately, but if anybody does have any questions out there, please do send them in, and or add them into the Slack channel, and we'll pass them on to Brian to answer. But thank you very much, Brian, for sharing the latest research and the psychology on colors.
Okay, my pleasure. Take care, and we'll see you on Slack.
Thank you. So up next, apologies. Up next, we have Sindhuja, who will be talking about e-commerce on TV. and she's the lead product designer for Roku. So welcome, Sindhuja. And over to you now. Thank you very much. Oh, apologies, I can't hear you. So we do have a problem with sound. Not sure, in the settings, which should be just underneath the screen, you should have an audio option.
Are you able to hear me now?
I can hear you perfectly now. So
Perfect.
apologies for the full start. I'll hand over to you now properly this time. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you everybody for tuning in. It's an amazing opportunity to get a chance to actually like connect and share some of the work that I've been doing in this space. So without much further ado, I'll just get started. So they say, you know, your intro is the best part of your presentation, right? Like people are really, really tuning in to listen to your intro. So I have the best introduction that you could think of. So, you know, let me just reveal it right now. So never mind, I was kidding. So the biggest thing that I wanted to like first talk about is this is a talk where, you know, I will go through some of the concepts of designing commerce experiences for television. Roku is also working on this space, and I am the designer that's working in this space. But consider this talk as more of an industry overview. Think about it more like, you know, how does commerce actually work on TV, and what are companies in this space thinking about as they're exploring this new medium for commerce? So that's my big disclaimer. And, you know, the actual star of the talk is actually now. So you can see that this is a very classic experience of the early 90s and the 2000s, right? So this is, for those who don't know, an online shopping channel, which is usually late night television, where, you know, you have discounts and products, new products that are discovered in an on-streaming talk show. And the best part about this is that, you know, this is such a native experience to shopping on commerce. Actually, people discovered new products and found new things to buy and offers through this. So if you were to actually think about this, TV was the original mode of commerce. And then, you know, all the experiences of desktop and mobile and everything came along, and shopping gradually moved to these mediums. So what we're doing right now as a set of companies that are focused in this space is taking shopping back into TV, the original mode where it all started. So if you're thinking that this is actually a talk about the future, no, it's actually a talk going back to the past. And we're going to be talking about how the past is being reinvented to accommodate into the future. So for today's talk, we'll cover the following items. We'll talk about how people shop today. We'll talk about the role of television today, and then how these two worlds meet, and then we will conclude. So how do people usually shop? So shopping has evolved so much in the past decade, in the past 2 decades, right? Like people actually went into stores and people loved that in-person experience. They loved the experience of touching and feeling items and actually shopping. But with the advent of the pandemic, things changed and things shifted more online. And that's what we actually see, right? So we see that about 49% of customers who are surveyed in countries favor online shopping. And this includes shopping from your mobile phone, your desktop, or what have you. This also means that they love the comfort of being at their home. They love the fact that the products are getting delivered to their doorstep. And they also love the easy return policy that a lot of these retailers have brought into play. So it's really this experience of being at the comfort of your home, experiencing the joys of shopping, but doing it from your couch. And 2/3 of shoppers said that they actually watched online video to get new ideas and inspiration. So these come in so many forms, right? People do YouTube videos, they do TikTok videos, there are tutorial videos, and then there are Instagram Reels. There are influencers that use these products and promote them. But the biggest mode of consumption for these users is actually video. And which is the mode that plays the most video in your home? It is television, right? So people actually watch a lot of video content on TV, and that's where the perfect marriage of these two mediums of shopping and video shopping especially brings in TV in the forefront of the whole new frontier in shopping. So companies are really tuning into this. For example, you can see that Amazon recently launched the Amazon Live shopping experience, where you can have actually a person who tries on a product, gives expert reviews of product or something like that, more like an influencer. But you can see that these are stream channels right on the Amazon homepage. You can see that Instagram's doubling down on it, Facebook and TikTok, all of them are trying to take a piece of this video shopping pie. And they're all doing such a great job at it that they're creating this new frontier of shopping, and people actually feel more like they're experiencing things in store. They're able to see what a product looks and feels like. They're able to get expert opinions. They're even able to do virtual try-ons in some situations. There are some companies and startups that are working on that. So this space is evolving, and this space is evolving really fast. So now let's actually talk about the role of TV in this, right? So TV as such, when we think about it, it is the largest screen in your living space. And it's also a shared experience device, right? You mostly do not watch TV alone. It's usually a shared experience of watching a game or a series or a movie or what have you. And there are people that are watching at different points in the day, and there are a lot of people that build their days around TV. TV is usually the place where people go to when they're having dinner, when they actually retire back from a long day at work and all of those things. TV has a very special meaning in every house, and there's also a very special reason why people actually gravitate to watch experiences on TV. So this means that when you're thinking about building shopping experiences for this specific medium, you're going to really have to think about what are the different considerations for designing on TV, right? And then on top of it, when you've designed for TV, the next step is designing a shopping experience for TV. So let's just walk through that. So you can see that with TV, the UI is very different. So you can see that most TV devices can range or be in your household for about like 10 to 15 years. People don't upgrade their TVs as often as they do their smartphones or their laptops or their computers. So it tends to be a device that is in your household for a longer period of time. This means that when you're really thinking about these older devices that are there in the market, your design considerations should take these evolving technologies into account. Which is why when you're designing for TV, you have this notion that is called as the safe area. With the safe area, you can see that there is a 90 pixel padding throughout your screen, and all the significant actions in your TV UI actually happens within this area. And this area is also considered the best for call to actions. For example, if you're trying to add buttons like watch more episodes or shop or whatever, you try to put it within this specific area so that it doesn't cut off and users can actually get to it quickly through the different modalities of remote interaction. And then this is the most fun part of designing for TV, right? You have so many devices, you have so many configurations of devices. They range all the way from the most outdated hardware to new and modern hardware that companies and platforms in this space are innovating in. But what's common across all of them are these directional D-pads. So you can see that your user is going to use that D-pad, which is this part of your remote, to go up and down or left and right. And this means that when you're thinking about navigation paradigms for TV, you really have to break it down into these being very, very simplistic experiences. You can see that's why most of the TV UI tends to have big, very cinematic UI, right? Like you can see big blocks of buttons, you can see big blocks of banners, movie banners or tiles, and row kind of UI that's front and center in TV design. And you can also see that here the primary call to action is usually nested within that safe area that we spoke about. And that's why you can see that a lot of the TV UI apps that you see follow somewhat of this paradigm in the real world. You can see here, right? So you can see that this row, these big dramatic rows, the focus state are all key important elements of designing for UI. Now let's actually break it down. How do users actually navigate in a TV UI? They use their D-pad to go up and down, but the primary UX principle that you need to nail when you're designing for TV as a TV designer is what's your landing focus state, because that's going to be the compass for the user. And that's why you can see that focus states gain the most prominence in most TV UI. You can see that there's always an element that has the default focus, and then to move down or up, that focus moves. So the focus is essentially taking your navigation from one part of the screen to the other part of the screen. And when you want to click and explore more details, there's the OK button that will take you into a transient view. And the thing again is that that next view is usually the final part of the experience, right? So we talk about 3-step experiences on web and on mobile, but on TV, it's actually 2 steps. It's usually a first step and then the final step, and that's about it. So these provide very, very unique challenges when you're thinking about building shopping experiences for TV. And then finally, there's also this 10 feet UX consideration that the user comes from. You know, we walk through the 10 feet UX considerations right now, but on top of all this, there is this context switch that's happening when you're encouraging users to shop via TV. And what's that context switch that I'm talking about? So when you're watching TV, you're usually laid back, you're cuddled in your blanket, you have your coziest PJs on, and you're in this like sift and consume mode, right? Like, so there's usually very ambient lighting to not really get into the way, or, you know, your kids and toddlers might be running around the house. Whatever your context is, people are not really paying too much attention and leaning in too much into the TV viewing experience. It's mostly happening passively. What that means is when you're thinking about building shopping experiences for TV, you really need to transition the user from the passive, laid-back state of I'm just going to consume content, or I'm just going to let content run in the background so that my kids can keep quiet, to actively engaging and buying the product, exploring the product, and all of that. So that's the biggest challenge when you're thinking about designing these forms of interactive experiences on TV. The other part is also, what do the companies and brands have to gain from this, right? So TV has usually been the influencer medium, right? People get influenced by shows, people get influenced by actors. TV is the default influencer platform. So there is a lot of inspiration that people draw from television. And what this means for brands is this is actually the perfect place to make that connection and make that synergy. As put by the Walmart CMO, William White, you can see that, you know, right when the user is influenced by, say, a particular piece of furniture that comes on a show, right when the user sees a particular promotion that comes for a product that they've been looking to buy, whether it's a beauty product or an everyday product or what have you, it's the perfect synergy of connecting the user from that moment of inspiration to the actual point of purchase. So brands are really thinking about shortening that distance between discovery and inspiration, and finally actually purchase. So let's think about and let's look at how companies are actually doing this. As I told you, there are just so many companies in this space, and there are so many design considerations that they're actually playing with. And you can see that these are all happening in the exploration mode, right? There is still no source of truth. And that's what makes working in this area very, very exciting. This is a completely new frontier, though it's been around for such a long time, because people have changed in the current. And like, when we're building for the future, we want to build at least 10 years ahead and thinking and forecasting how people will be working or consuming these experiences, maybe 10 years ahead. So here you can see this experience where, this actor or this person is actually playing on a piano, and you can see that the ad for that piano or for that device actually shows up right then and there. And here the designer is making a few assumptions, right? They're making the assumption that the user is not going to actively want to interact on TV, that they're going to actually be passive, and they would rather jump off to a different device and actually make that purchase decision or exploration decision of what is this product, what's it priced at, and stuff like that. So that's why you see that there's a QR code here. So the assumption from the designer side or this company side is that the user is actually going to go and pick their mobile phone, scan their QR code from the device or from their TV, and actually go and explore the product. And this is actually a very valid assumption to make in a place like TV shopping, because your TV is usually a social experience. What might be very, very interesting to you might not be interesting to your spouse or your child or your grandma. So that really makes the fact that we want individualized experiences while being there in the viewing context. So this is one space that companies are innovating and working hard towards, which is taking you to a different viewing context and letting you do your exploration or shopping in a different device or in a different viewing context. And here you can see some of the ads that Google is running right now, right? So this is a very, very interesting ad, because this actually acts or treats your TV like what I explained, a virtual billboard. So this treats your TV as a place for brand awareness, and you can actually get the price, and you can get the price of a particular item in this ad, but you will have to go pick up your phone and type corner.com to actually leverage this capability of easy delivery that they are advertising. And here you can see these experiences becoming more and more immersive, right? So you can see that there is this product, but if you want to order it, you can actually pick up your remote and maybe order it right then and there. So that's a very interesting experience where this is more integrated. But again, this company and this design team is making the assumption that users have their remotes readily available. And if we've done this dance around where's the remote, we know that that's actually a pretty bold assumption to make. And then in the final experience, you can see how this actually takes it even further, right? So this is an example of an ad that's run by Amazon, and you can see this connotation of a linked account here. So this knows that this is Linda's account, and they're advertising for this product, but you can actually go and add that product to your cart and check it out at a later point. Or, they know that these are the types of products that you've been shopping for in Amazon.com. So they could be serving relevant ads that are based on your interests or on previous purchases that they've made. So these are all just very, very interesting frontiers that companies are exploring in this space. And you can see that it's actually all over the place, right? They're making bets from everything happens in your TV that's connected to all the different devices that you're already using, that's connected to your account, that has your payment information too. I don't want anything to do with my TV. I'm going to do everything in a different device. So you can see that the range of experiences are so broad, and that's what makes this space a very, very interesting and a challenging space to work on. The truth is, one or all of these companies are going to figure it out at some point, right? But as they go through that testing phase and innovating phase of testing these different modalities, that's where you get to actually observe this product evolve right in front of your eyes. So in closing, I wanted to kind of talk about how can design shape the future of commerce, right? So you can see that a lot of these problems of shopping on TV and bringing commerce experiences on TV at large is actually a design problem, because we don't really know what users are going to need and want. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to understand and assimilate what we know from different contexts of shopping and different contexts of user experience, that this is what users will need. And we're actually building this whole experience out. And you can see that design plays a front and center role in this form of experience. But I wanted to also just like throw this question to all of you about how can design play a much bigger role, especially when we're talking about a seat at the table, right? How can design influence product strategy, especially in these greenfield spaces which are evolving? And will people actually buy physical products on TV? I know this happened like 10 years ago. I know this happened 20 years ago. T-commerce or TV commerce is not a new experience, right? Companies and products and brands have been doing this for so long. But now the notion of TV ads or TV in general is something where ads come up and then that's about it. Will they want to actually go and change their mental model after like this long of a gap to actually buy physical products and goods from your TV than just subscriptions or TV channels? And what is the impact of video on shopping? We know that we love the touch and feel, and we really like to see products before we actually buy them. But will video actually supplant that experience? Will video supplement that experience? These are all questions that I'm really curious to know and find answers to in the upcoming days as I work on this. One of the things that I know from video is that video is a very, very powerful storytelling medium. And a lot of times brands actually want to tell their stories. And when brands want to tell their stories, and when customers are more inclined in listening to the overall brand story than just buying the product right now, which seems to be the trend that we're actually like moving towards, I believe that's where video shopping will actually start to play a bigger and bigger key role. For example, customers are becoming more and more brand conscious. They are becoming more environment conscious. They're becoming more like health conscious. They don't want to put a ton of junk or sugar in their bodies. They don't want to be polluting the environment and stuff like that. So that means that, or they're also becoming like very concerned about animal cruelty and things like that. So brands are really leaning into telling their story by hinging themselves to specific causes. And that's where I believe like video shopping, in addition to talking about the product, in addition to talking about the quality and the different aspects that will actually influence you to make the decision to buy the product, will actually kickstart and take off in the upcoming years. Finally, I wanted to talk about designing for TV and web. Web and mobile have so many interesting paradigms that they share, right? You have your click states, you have your detail states, and in the web, you have your hover state and stuff like that. With TV, you're limited by 4 buttons. You don't have the screen real estate of the user trying to, and being able to use a mouse or your finger to click anywhere, anytime, in any way. And that severely limits you in terms of how you can design, but it's also a good thing because it really adds to focus in terms of how you're designing. So I wanted to understand, like, as you do this as a thought exercise, what are some aspects that come to your mind when you think about designing, especially these forms of very detailed experiences on television? With that, I'll end. Thank you so much. If you're interested in this type of content, definitely reach out, definitely subscribe to my newsletter. But I'm also very open to sharing the answers and thoughts and considerations for all these questions that I post. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and share your ideas and inspiration. I look forward to sharing from you all. All right.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's just some of the interesting bits that I picked up from that was I just never thought about the constraints of designing for TV and how you really have to think about it. I loved your example of where is the remote, because I never have the remote handy.
Yep. Yeah. So it's always interesting when we are thinking about these like different experiences, how they've evolved our whole thinking into design paradigms. We are just, it's not just about UI, it's about your context, it's about what you're doing on a day-by-day basis, and how crazy is your household.
Excellent. So yeah, if anybody out there has any questions, please do just share them and I'll pass them along. But I'm going to start with one. And what I was thinking about is people have become a little bit accustomed with the internet to having a little bit more contextual ads being presented to them nowadays. And they can get a little bit, what I've seen is people get more frustrated when they see very irrelevant ads.
Right.
So what is the solution to, as you were saying, TV is a social activity of multiple people with very disparate needs. So is there anything that's being thought of there, that how do you try to not piss people off by showing
Yeah.
them irrelevant ones, but it might be relevant to one person in the room?
Yeah, I'm sure, like, companies, there are some companies that have this unique leverage of knowing much more about you, right? For example, Amazon does, especially when you're linking your Fire TV to your Amazon account. They have a much broader context of your shopping habits, especially if we're talking about it in the context of shopping something on TV. They have that context, and that can help them actually build the right story and show you the right set of ads, instead of what you see in the middle of live shows or live TV games and stuff like that. So I believe like that's a frontier that some platforms have the leverage of. In others, I believe like they're again like actively trying to invest in building this knowledge base, either through understanding your viewing habits, or like there are different metrics that they can track to be able to get some sense of what you might be interested in and what your household might be interested in. So it is, to your point, a very interesting problem, because it's this communal device, unlike the other ones. And I believe like that's where the challenges lie.
Great. Yeah, no, it does sound like it's an interesting space. And the other question that I had was, just blanked it there. It was around, yes, as a designer. So you're trying to balance user needs and business needs. So a user often doesn't want to be interrupted or see ads, and a business wants to show you ads and interrupt you because they want to make money. So how are you, as the kind of designer, trying to balance those needs? How are you trying to do that? And are you just leaning on the side of the business making the money, so let's show the ads? Or are you trying to balance it with the user needs?
Yeah, I think like, at least the way that that I've been thinking about this is this like a valid medium for people to make this type of commerce transaction in, right? And there have been so many times that person, and I know that this is just a bad way to design, but I'm just telling it as a story, where I felt like, oh my God, I want that shirt. I really love that dress that she's wearing and stuff like that in a specific show. And I've really had like experiences like that when I've watched a specific, a home remodel show, or a particular attire that a person on TV is wearing and stuff like that. I'm like, I really want that outfit. I really want that specific gadget for my house and stuff like that. So at that point, right, that's where the message from the Walmart CMO really resonated, where they're really thinking about bridging that gap and offering that capability for users that might want to leverage that, right? So I feel like a lot of us have felt that way. We felt like we want to shop that specific look, especially with like fixer upper kind of stuff. I would go and buy everything that I see in that show. For those who don't know, it's a home remodel show where this beautiful couple can actually go and redesign your entire house. And I'm like, I want to do that for my house. I want to get all the stuff that they're showing. And you're really building those experiences for television, then really thinking about how much money is this going to make? It's about like bridging that gap pretty much.
Brilliant. All right, well, that's actually all we have time for now, but thank you very much again for sharing. I found it very interesting, and I hope everybody out there did as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end for today. But if you did enjoy the talks and did enjoy the kind of content that we produce, we do have a conference coming up in the USA in New York in May. There'll be 25 speakers, 8 workshops, 800 attendees, and that's for the whole product team. So product managers, UX researchers, designers, developers. So please do come along to that. It's much kind of what you experienced today, but at a much larger scale and in person as well. So you really get to experience it. But I want to thank once again our speakers for tonight for sharing their amazing knowledge. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. But that brings us to an end for tonight. So thank you, everybody, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.